Is that okay with you, Mr. Oscar?
Oh, yeah.
I'm from.
Is that okay with you?
No, I'd like to go.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell Bill. He just texted, on my way.
Is Tracy coming?
She told me she was gonna try. Ellington. So it's north central, right on the Massachusetts border. Yeah. It's a town of 8,000 people.
I guarantee you, I've been.
Get this.
Nice, that's my kind of town.
I hate it.
Oh, see? I
And
like that.
guess what? I don't like Connecticut either, because Connecticut is a boring state.
I think it's the greatest state in the world.
More. It is.
No. Pretty cool.
You're off the record right now.
But it's nice.
My wife is from where? Union College.
Yeah, because I've been to
We'll give Tracy like another minute, and then we'll go back.
My wife's from
You mentioned that before.
As remote as that, right? So that is 40 minutes west of.
Okay. No electricity, no running.
They eventually all that house. It was a long chat.
You want to get people to know.
Really? I didn't know that.
Wow.
That doesn't surprise me.
You didn't know what, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to stand this
One more minute. We're gonna give Tracy 1 minute.
Oh, Tracy.
Yep.
Did Tracy say she's coming, Lauren?
I didn't talk to her.
I talked to her earlier. She told me she was gonna try. So we'll just give her another minute, and then if not, we have a quorum, so we'll get going. You know what? I noticed that it's not only just a
You
comment.
know what? You felt really.
It's all. Well, chair.
I run the Cubs Club back after the last meeting. It was bad. It was bad. I got like 5 minutes into like, I can't just stop doing that.
All right, you ready, guys? All right. Seeing as we have a quorum, I would like to call to order the April 11th Community Preservation Committee meeting. Thank you everyone for coming. First thing on the agenda tonight is Center Realty Trust, Mr. Osgood. You want to sit there or a lectern, doesn't matter to me, just want you to have a microphone. So we appreciate you coming in. You know, I know you know that we sent you a letter. I think it was fiscal year 2015. The town approved a project for the Center Realty Trust on Academy Road. I think a large portion of that submission, or you know, some part of that submission included a parking lot, a proposed parking lot on Lot 3. And it's been a few years, so we thought we'd have you back in and check on the status of that parking lot. So I'll give you the floor, and then you know, give folks an opportunity to ask any questions if we have them.
I think there might be a little confusion on the parking lot.
Okay.
It was never our intention to immediately build a parking lot. What we did, the thrust of our application before your board was to get funding and to save 3 lots, three parcels of land, which would have accommodated 4 or 5 houses, and give the town a conservation easement over those. As I'm sure you're aware, in these conservation easements, once you do them, they're pretty much cast in stone. You can't just willy-nilly change them. And what we thought was that maybe we should try to have a reserved area for the parking, a parking lot should, at some point in time in the future, there's congestion badly enough in the old center that the parking lot would be necessary. And what would trigger that would be if you look at the old center, I mean, there aren't an awful lot of buildings there, as you know, but there are 2 or 3 buildings that could have a major impact on the old center. One is the Masonic Lodge, which is a big building, and you could end up with some offices in there or apartment or something. It is zoned in the business category. The Grange, which is roughly around a 5,000 square foot building, two floors, it did have an occupancy permit for the use of 300 people at any given time. That's a lot of people to stuff in a small building like that. And then you have the textile building, which nobody knows what's going to happen to it. But if right now, the parking problem in the old center is really a management problem, in our opinion. But it could turn into a real problem given the development of just those 3 buildings, and then anything else that goes on, although there isn't much land to do anything. But that was what we tried to do, and I think that's what we did. When we went before the state, you have to get approval from the state for the conservation easement, again, as you know, and they were very reluctant to allow a reservation for a parking lot. I got to tell you, I mean, really reluctant to do it. And we pushed that it wasn't something that we would do now or in the immediate foreseeable future. But at some point in time, beyond my lifetime, it may happen. It may need to happen. And that'll be up to the people that are out there to come up with the funding and the ability to get it done.
Hold on. Can I just ask one quick question first? But when you say the people, would be up to the people out there, who specifically?
Well, it would be if somebody were going to, say, use the Masonic Lodge, they might have to contribute to it. If they go to use the Grange, that's owned by Center Realty, they would contribute their share. The church really has no parking, none at all. We think they should bear some of the burden. And then in the parking that we were talking about, in the design, Bob Stevens, before his death, we went to some pretty elaborate design because Bob wanted to ensure that if the parking lot ever got done, that it would be done the way he wanted to see it. So when you look at the plan of it, there's a fence and there's a whole bunch of things. Those were at the requirement of Bob Stevens, who was the seller of the land. There is no question. What we wanted to preserve was the two house lots which were new to the ownership of Center Realty. They would definitely have houses on them. There'd be houses there today if we didn't come before your board and get the money and buy the land. So we took, I don't know whether you want me to explain, the lots. There were 2 new lots that we acquired, and then we took one 3-acre, 2.67 acre, I think it is exact, opposite the Kittredge house and farm. We took that and we put the conservation restriction on all 3 of them, all 3 parcels.
Sure. I'm Bill Callahan. So I'm just looking at the application from February of 2014, and I'll quote it. Parking in the old historic district continues to have a negative impact on the historic landmark and is damaging to the road shoulders and scenic vistas within the areas. And then it goes on to say that the terms would allow CRT to create a limited parking area in this, etc. And it does go on to say it would be screened and it would match everything. And I think I was on the finance committee at the time, and I remember when this came up, and we were saying, oh, okay, that makes sense, that the town's getting a conservation easement on some of that land, and another piece of the land is coming as a possible parking lot. Because that parcel was a little bit different, because it previously, if I'm not mistaken, belonged to Mr. Stevens as part of his.
That was one of the two parcels. That was parcel 3 in the acquisition package. Actually, parcel 2, but it's numbered 3. And then there was another parcel, approximately 1 acre parcel on the west side of
Right.
Academy Road.
Right.
So
It reads to me like continues. It's an active verb. It's not like could potentially at some future time be a problem. It seems.
Well, you mean the parking itself?
I mean, in the application, when it says, parking continues to have a negative impact, the terms would allow creating a parking lot. It doesn't say. It seems very active to me. It's not like parking could be a problem at some future date in the future. It continues to be a problem.
Parking is a problem now.
Right.
But we felt it was a management problem. The parking could be, with the space that's available over there, could be improved.
I mean, I wasn't on this board at that time, but it certainly seemed to me like if you didn't think parking was a problem and you didn't think a parking lot needed to be there, and you could just come to the town and say, we think this land should have a conservation restriction on it because otherwise there could be a house there. And that's a very different proposition than coming to the town and saying, we think there could be a parking lot here that the residents could enjoy could have to enjoy the old center. I mean, those are two fundamentally different ways of looking at a piece of land that the town is going to take taxpayer money and purchase.
Well, yeah, we used the money to buy the land. I mean, some members of your board told us it was the best deal they'd seen come through here. I mean, there's what the town got, when you look at the value page, there was $1 million worth of value, and the town paid $570 to get the conservation easement on that value of that property. The conservation easements, we had to have an appraisal done, have a significant impact on the value of the property. I mean, about 80% is what is the norm.
Are those lots buildable?
Yes. Yeah, definitely they'd be buildable. Especially that one that's right there next to the church. I mean, that's well, the other one's buildable across the street, but it's not as desirable a lot. And on top of that, there was Bob Stevens. If we didn't buy the lot, Bob Stevens could really create 2 and possibly 3 lots. Wouldn't have been Bob because he died, but his family, who don't live in North Andover, could have done that. So he agreed in the acquisition of that Lot 3, the one down by the church, he agreed that if that were to be bought, he put a restriction on the house that no other land attached to the big yellow house, the John Stevens house, could be developed.
Maybe I can kind of clarify a little bit kind of where Bill's coming from on this is, I see that, it looks like in the application, again, I wasn't on the board at the time, I'm still relatively new to the board here, but when I first read the application, looked at, parking is called out as a selling point of the deal, right, the overall deal that we're putting. It's on page 1, nice and bold, its own section, an exhibit showing a designed parking lot. To me, that looks like it was a part of the selling point of the overall transaction. Just reading it, coming in, not having been here and seeing the history of it. And it also points out, I mean, the wording is, I think, very carefully chosen, if constructed, and it would allow CRT to build it. It also comments that the cost of the parking area would be the sole expense of CRT. I know you're talking about kind of maybe other users in the center possibly contributing to that. I guess, kind of where we're at now, we're 5 years down the road since the application. I think we all agree that parking was an issue then, and parking is an issue now. It feels like it was, again, a big part of this overall application. I guess we just add, it sounds like there are no plans right now by CRT to build a parking lot.
No,
to fill the
they're
parking.
not. The reason the plans got brought to the level that they are and were so emphasized was because of the position the state took that you just simply can't build a parking lot on a conservation easement parcel of land.
The state took that position after the application or before the application?
During the process of submitting the application.
Okay.
Do you have correspondence from them?
I don't have all the correspondence. We hired a woman that I think previously had worked for the town, doing these conservation easements. This thing was 10 times as complicated as we anticipated.
Sure, yeah.
And we hired Nellie Aiken is her name, and she's very good. Not cheap by any stretch, but good. And she did all the negotiations with the state for us, back and forth, and they wanted to see exactly how big it would be and all that sort of thing, if it ever got built. That's why it ended up as being, talked about more.
So would this be a fair assessment of your position, is that a lot is not, as Brian alluded to, not in the foreseeable plan for you guys, and that's in a large part or wholly in part because the state is saying you can't?
No, the state has agreed that we could reserve the site
Good.
and to build a
Yep.
parking lot there. And the election of when that would happen was with us.
Yep.
And working with the town and all the property owners. When it, it's like going to the doctor and your knees hurt and they tell you, well, you can have an operation, and you say, well, I don't know. And they'll say, well, you'll know when you need that operation. Well, that's what it is. You'll know when the traffic is so bad that parking is critical over there.
So let me ask you this, and then I'll give other folks a chance. What would your expectation be of when the need arises? Would you expect the town manager to ask you to do it? Would you expect us to ask you to do it?
No,
or
I would think when the Masonic Lodge, when something changes in the character of that, the Grange building, or possibly even the textile building.
So, yeah.
I mean, any one of those, or combination of those, could trigger a real demand on the parking. And there's another alternative, and that is Center Realty owns 2 or 3 other parcels of land, which might be better suited for some type of parking.
I'm just trying to get at what, so you say, the development of those buildings would trigger this, but trigger how? I'm getting just to the trust's
Well, if somebody came
decision?
if somebody came in with a development plan for the Masonic Lodge, they have very little parking, but they do have a municipal parking lot next door to them.
Yep.
But, my experience in going through the planning board and some of the other boards in town is that there are some formulas for how many vehicles you have to accommodate. You can't just always use the municipal lot. That's for transient people, and there's an ice cream store up there,
Yep.
and cake shop and things. So it will probably happen that you need a parking lot up there at some point in time. Is it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess sort of just to clarify my point a little bit, in the application, you sort of point out, as both Bill and Brian said, that parking was a problem then. I think we've established that parking, or you said yourself that parking is still a little bit of a problem. But not bad enough to sort of put the lot in until 1 or 2 or 3 of those buildings that you pointed out would need a bigger lot,
Well,
would be renovated?
Would change this.
The number of spaces that we designed, I think it was 22. It wasn't too many. Well, it's hard to see it on there, but I think it's 22, 21, 22 spaces. It's not a whole lot.
Okay.
But,
It's 26.
is it 26?
Anybody else? Terry?
So-
Oh, Deb, sorry. Deb first.
Thank you.
Sorry, Terry.
Okay. Mr. Osgood, it seems to me that all of this verbalization of these other additional decisions from all of these other buildings hasn't really been memorialized in a document. I mean, you have said it, but where is it written that all of that is going to determine when this parking lot is going to be built, who is going to build it, and who makes that determination?
Well, the who that would build it would be Center Realty.
Right.
They own the land, and they would be the builder. The determination of when it happens is when the situation becomes so critical that everybody says, we don't have parking, we're just destroying the old center.
But where is that defined in the document?
I don't
Because
think it is.
it's just, you just kind of like throw it out there, but you need something more definitive, because who knows when that's going to happen? I mean, as you
Well-
said, it could be like when we're all dead,
Yeah.
and no one's going to know because it hasn't been memorialized in writing.
Well, now we're on TV, so.
But it's just that what we did was reserve a slot that if you ever need it, it's there, and
Yeah.
Center Realty, the reason Center Realty would build it is because they would want control of it.
In my opinion.
It would be on their property, you know.
Okay,
and
in
they
my
would-
opinion, it isn't really spelled out clearly enough, and I'm concerned
Well-
about that.
I mean, there were a couple different ways we could have gone back in 2015. We could have said, the Center Realty Trust could have sold the parcels to the conservation, to the town outright, right? That could have been
Well, Center
one.
Realty didn't own them. They were owned by Bob Stevens.
So how did the actual A to B to C go? So Bob Stevens sold them to Center Realty after you guys obtained the funding from the town, or?
No, the funding was, the title transferred first from Bob Stevens to the town for the conservation easement. He transferred the title of the land, and then the conservation easement was put on. That's how the sequencing of it worked, I think.
Okay. And so Center Realty Trust pays taxes on that
Yeah,
lot?
yes. Well, yes, on the reduced value. They don't, the conservation easement
Right, reduces the value.
takes 80% of the value, so the tax is significantly reduced. Center Realty Trust is a 501c2, which is a trust that it has to be owned by a 501c3. The C3s are tax-free. The C2s are not. They pay real estate taxes. Center Realty Trust pays around $34,000 a year in real estate taxes. And then it has to turn over any profits that it makes. A nonprofit is supposed to be just that, a not-for-profit. But they do allow them to have this. There are not many 501c2s as opposed to the number of C3s there are. There are thousands of C3s. Literally, there are thousands in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, Bill.
I was going to say, and then finally, what, in a hypothetical situation, if somebody came forward and said, we think there's a parking problem in the old center, and we'd be willing to fund a project through the Community Preservation Committee to to provide some parking in the old center. Would the Center Realty Trust be amenable to
Well,
doing a parking lot if it were funded through another
I
method?
mean, I think that's the concept. I don't know whether they'd be amenable to it or not. I mean, there's three
Right.
trustees, I'm one. And the three trustees will not be the same trustees after May 1st. We're all off the board on May 1st, approximately. But that's the concept, is that there's a piece of land that can be used. It's not encumbered by a state regulation that it can't be used.
So I was on the board at the time, and I remember the project well, because there was a couple of things the thing that excited me was the parking lot. Having been up there for the 4th of July and for, the Fall Festival and the different events when we're looking everywhere for a parking lot, we just don't have anything, and they're parking on the grass and anywhere they can park. To your point, ruining the landscape. So I was excited about that. I was also excited that we were going to capture that other land and not have it. But at the time, we sold this as a parking lot, and at the time we told people we had a problem. So in my eyes, that's when we needed a parking lot. When we told the taxpayers in North Andover that this is what you're putting your money on, and this is what we're going to do, then that is when we determined we needed a parking lot. When we made that vote that day, that was in it, and that's what they understood. We didn't go up and say, and I get your point, we're going to put this restriction on because we want to save this for the future, because it's very difficult, as you said, to change later. If you decided you didn't have that in there and wanted to put a parking lot in 10 years from now, and you could have said that.
It's
But we
not
didn't.
difficult, it's
But we
impossible.
didn't say that. So I'm just, and how it gets paid for or whatever, I think it's up to you guys. And the shared, if I owned a business up there, I'd probably want to share in that and add some parking, but if they don't have to, but I mean, but I think it's up to you guys. The burden's on you guys right now to give the town what you promised when we went to that. That may have not been your intention to promise that, but that is what you promised when you put that thing forward. So that's the way I feel about that.
TJ or Frank, anything?
You covered everything.
Bill, Brian?
Yeah, and I don't have anything. I think with the language is what the language is. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's, I think, our challenge right now.
Okay.
So,
Can I make a public comment?
Of course.
Hi, I'm Lori Burzloff, 24 Baldwin Street. I also work for the town, full disclosure. I just have two questions on this. One is, and Deb, you may know this or you may have some idea, but according to the restriction that's on record in the Registry of Deeds, no fences are allowed on that property. I haven't been by in a while, but the last time I looked, there is a fence. So I don't know if that's a violation of the restriction that's on there. And the second question I have, which I don't know if you guys will know or not, because I know a lot of you are new. You said that 2 houses could be built on that lot, and the reason why he sold it to us was because we agreed to buy it so that there wouldn't be a conservation, but wasn't there already an agreement to sell that house?
No, not the time we started. This stuff was started way back in 2012 or 13.
So
We didn't-
so it's just coincidence that all of it happened all at the same time?
Well, the coincidence, we were talking to Bob Stevens about it, and then Bob Stevens was taken ill, and that's when he made the decision to sell the house.
So-
That was the trigger for the house.
So really, we didn't have to buy it to prevent it?
When I say you could have 2 houses, the total parcel that Bob Stevens had with the big house is, it was about 3 acres. Thereabouts, I'd have to look up what it is, but it was about 3 acres. And we carved off Lot 3, which is on the plan. There was still adequate land left for another house in there, at least one. So there'd be Lot 3 that we acquired and gave the easement. And then next door to it, there could have been another lot. The house would have been built up in the back.
I'm sure it would have been beautiful, too. I don't see an issue with having one more house up there, but that's neither here nor
Yeah,
there, but thank you.
Pass that. Thanks.
But the thing about the house on Academy Road is there's only been one house built since the early 1800s. I mean, it's a very beautiful road, Academy Road. And if it ends up with just, and I'm a builder, but if it ends up with just houses plunked up and down, the beauty in the historic asset will be lost.
Lori, to your question, I will check with our conservation agent and clarify all of this, because I believe that you are correct. And to Terry's point, that parking lot was a selling feature. So I think that was a big, big thing of acquiring that land. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to check into it, and I will report to you as soon as I talk
Back to the committee.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll report back.
Yes,
So,
I will.
Mr. Osgood, just, Deb is a member of the Conservation Committee and their representative on this board, so.
fine.
So thank you. Appreciate that, Deb.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think
The
you.
fence issue we didn't address that Laurie mentioned. I think you're talking about the fence around the property?
It's a public property and the public can't get to it.
That'd be an
Public
issue.
Well,
has
that-
access to it.
That's maybe something that we should deal with. I mean, I don't disagree with it, but it doesn't mean we can just take the fence down all around the house. I mean,
Well, let Deb check on this, and she'll report back, and we can, get it right from the conservation officer.
in the conservation easement, there is no requirement to do anything. And it would have been noted in there as a requirement, I would think.
Okay. Well, we'll figure that out, yeah.
Okay, can I, so, again, then maybe this is for my own education, since I wasn't around at the time, could you kind of remind me how the transactions went? Because it looks like the house sold in September of 2014. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Okay. The house sold in September of 2014.
Okay.
And the separate lot sold the following year after town meeting, presumably, is that?
Fiscal year 2015, I believe.
I'm
Fiscal year
I-
2015 started in 2014
14,
on the
right.
7th of July.
I'm just trying to understand how this.
I
the
think
process
Bob
went.
Stevens died, now that I think about it a little bit. Bob Stevens died, and the deeds were put in escrow. Somebody was named as an ability to sign. I'd have to do that research, but I just forget what it is.
Okay.
Old people forget things.
You don't look a
Young
day
people
over
forget
25.
Yeah, I am, I'm telling you.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
I don't need to belabor the point. Yeah.
Well, the only thing, I just encourage you guys to really go back to your board, and look at how you can get that parking lot in. Because I would feel more comfortable if we did it, this is what we sold to the town, this is what the people think, this is what I thought, and how we can get that done. And then maybe we could have you back after the committee is met.
So I was going to suggest that perhaps you guys could go back and talk, and we can have you back in May or June to talk about this some more. And that way give Deb a chance to do her research with her committee, and we can do some research, you can do some research, and we can continue this discussion at the next meeting or the meeting after. Does that seem fair to you?
Yeah, we will, the three trustees that are there now will not be there after roughly
After
the
this
end.
month.
The end of this month, that's correct.
Okay.
But you were in place when all of this transpired.
Yes.
So maybe you could kind of like get together and decide this
Yeah,
before May
we
1st.
definitely could, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we'll tell the new trustees what you've asked about and give that information to them.
And would you mind sending to Lori or to us as a board perhaps the names and contact information of the new trustees so that we
Yes.
have that for our
Yeah.
records?
Yes.
Good, thank you. All right, anybody else? Okay, let's
Mr.
close this
Osgood.
matter. Thank you, Mr. Osgood,
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Okay, let me just double check here. Okay, so next on the agenda is our website update. Mr. Callahan.
Yeah, I have some good stuff. I'll
Oh, okay, sure, great.
I'll do a demo.
Can we put
gotta
this
plug in, you'll put it
down?
It's the only place where I know how to get on the screen.
Do you know, we need to put the screen down?
Yeah, I think I can do it.
Okay. Look at you.
I'm glad I didn't have to reach for it.
Do we, can we open this?
Yeah. Could you open that, please?
Bill, could you
In the
open
front.
that thing so we can see? Or we can go into the crowd. I don't know how that thing works. You didn't know you'd be doing AV stuff tonight, did you, Bill? The clicker doesn't work, Bill. I'm just kidding, I don't know. That's what my kids always tell me. It's not working, Dad.
It's out of batteries.
All I need now is a HDMI cable.
Can you steal one from that? Is there one plugged into that computer there?
No.
Or who would we have to talk to when we have this beautiful screen up here? To get some nice pictures of North Andover instead of,
So the default
Yes.
window stuff?
I got
Found one, look at that.
All right.
You're in Google Cast.
maybe we could put up CPA projects.
I think that'd be great. Well, I think Bill's about to show us some cool stuff, so.
Guy. Alright.
It's Bill's homework.
Alright. There we go, okay. Alright, so I bookmarked all these sites for easy use. So, this is all Chris McClure. All I did was send him a list of projects. So I'll show a bunch of different views of what he's done already and then how it could go. So we have more database to build, but this is kind of showing what the final output will look like. There'll be we'll have a splash page of a map, so you could go, double click on a project and it would come up. I don't think it's quite there yet, but that's the idea.
And what would come up would be what exactly?
I'll show you. So. Oh, this is the same one. Okay, hold on. So I have too many bookmarks. So, for example, this is the input form that
Yep.
they'll use, and they have plenty of people ready to do this in the STAR program,
Okay.
the work-off program
Yep.
for reduced property taxes for elders. And what would happen is they'd
Highways are cool.
put everything in right here. This is how they'd build it. It's just a simple intake form, the project, the name, etc. Then the geotag of where it would go, the link, and then, kind of the status. Plus, we can upload documents and photos.
So, and I think it's terrific. What, I see a note section there, and what, any thought yet on what documents, what notes that you might want to, would it be everything we have, or would it be something special, or just, and maybe you haven't thought about it yet, and that's fine.
We should talk about that as a board. And, I would say at a minimum, we should
Yeah.
have some sort of protocol to what gets posted to each site. I would assume application, final version of the document, so it's right there for the whole public to get, at a minimum,
And I'd
right?
like to see who we partnered with, both
Right.
financially
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, it's very, flexible. But here's kind of an example of, just off the limited, all I gave him was a spreadsheet with the year,
Yeah.
the amount, the project number. And so, 623 Osgood Street purchase. This is the Usula property, appropriately enough, is right there with the ID. And then, what I think what I think we should do in the notes, that would be, I think, where we could have some value. We could break down, because you'd want to get like a kind of crisp paragraph about what the project did.
Yeah.
We probably have a lot of it. We're probably pretty close with a lot of it. Wouldn't be a lot. But then the documents, I thought we should put the the application. I think it'd be useful to have all the applications up, because, I want people to see the applications. I think it would be a useful thing to have.
Yeah.
And then the grant agreements, we could also put up, because that memorializes, what we finally decided. And then we can put, any sort of number of pictures up there. And there could be, more in there too. And then one thing that we talked about was on the newly funded projects, now when we do a grant agreement, we're asking for them to report, I can't remember if it's twice a year or 4 times a year, about their progress. But he said that would be a really easy thing to build, and if we wanted to be just visible to the committee, we could do it that way. But it'd be good, and I think it would make things easier for everybody, because every quarter, they could just get an email that brings them to this sheet that says, what have you spent? What do you expect to spend? How much longer is this project going to go on?
Yeah.
And we could have like a dashboard that would say, this is what everybody said, or if this project didn't get back to us, maybe someone should give them a call and see, what's
Right.
going on. So we'd have,
That's cool.
I think it would help a lot on the tracking side too,
Yeah.
that aspect. And then we can have everything there.
I think that's very cool. I would encourage us to maybe take a next meeting after, whatever, and sort of, to Brian's point, and do exactly what you said, memorialize the things we want to put up there, so that when Chris is done and everything's done, ready to go, we got it.
Right.
I think this is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, and what we need too are the files. Like, I don't know where they.
I was going to ask you, where did you get where all the projects are, because some are missing?
Yeah, so I just took spreadsheets I had in my inbox to get them started, and I need to refine the list of projects.
I can work with you on that.
Yeah.
I don't know where files are, but I know where the projects are. I was there for just about all of them.
And I know John has mentioned in the past that he knew where some files were, so we'll have to get him involved.
And they're all set up to scan. Like, they
Yep.
have a whole room dedicated to fast scanning all this stuff. So that's very easy, and then I think that helps everybody, the town and us and so forth, and we're not, dependent on a paper record that could.
Yeah, Lori, maybe you could make a note that we could talk about at our next meeting, how to get a hold of all these files so that Chris's team could scan them.
The files may be more difficult, but just a printout of every project from day one. Would we have that through the finance? Would she have it?
Well, we have a printout of the name of the project.
Right.
We don't have like the applications or anything. Those we've been trying to get for quite some
We should
time.
still try and get them, but I'm just saying as a starting point, if we just had what we were looking for, so we don't even know the file we're missing, right? So if we had every project at least listed, and then we would know which files we're chasing.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think we should discuss at our next meeting or where those, we got to come together and find out where those files are so we can get them. Okay. Good stuff. Thanks, Bill.
And while he had that up, one of the agenda items for our next meeting would be where we're losing Jennifer, and she was the one who was going to walk the useful property, and now we have to get that back into another.
Yep.
So we should talk about it again at the next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Bill. So our next agenda item is signage for projects. And Bill, I know you're cleaning up, but I think that was something you wanted to talk about too, right? Signage for projects, or am I wrong on that?
No, you're right.
Okay. Well, take your time. I didn't mean to
Do you
put you.
signs examples put back on the board?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think we, it was interesting because, I go out, ride my bike down out Boxford Street out into Boxford, and kind of went by, so for example, I go by a bunch of projects on the way, like even Foster's Field. the sign is sort of hurting. And we have a bunch of big projects coming up, and I think, in just thinking about how to approach this, I think one of the things that we need some help. Like, we need a graphic designer, we need someone who does that to work with. I don't think it's any expertise, it's probably not a core expertise of anybody currently working for the town, and I just don't know how we start. So I'm just looking for, like, what would make sense? Do we, part of me, my procurement hat on says, like, we put out an RFP and say, like, we're looking for someone to, to do some graphic design work for us and kind of talk about somebody to come in and say, like, hey, here's what you do in municipal signage. Here's the things you should be thinking about in terms of materials and size, and if we want to have like a uniform sort of donated by community preservation, or if it wants to be a bigger thing where we say, like, for partner with the Conservation Commission or something and talk about other ways to, sort of make more consistent signage, and also, like, in terms of this commission, actually memorializing that we were involved with a lot of these, we funded a lot of these things.
I agree.
So,
I think we've all talked about the importance of these signs in the past, and I think we're all in agreement that that is important. Brian, were you gonna?
Yeah, no, I just, again, kicking around, trying to think of, what's the next steps, right? What's the next way forward to kind of move this along?
You got an idea?
Yeah, what I would do is I'd probably reach out to, I'd probably find out that whatever sign company did Boxford, for example, and perhaps bring them in for a discussion.
So, what I'd like to do first is I would volunteer to sit down with our town manager and ask her if we do have any of that competencies and wherewithal within our town already to do that. I think that would be a good starting position.
I'm not sure the same sign would work for every situation. For, you know what I'm saying? So, like, we just did a fire truck. We can't, we couldn't put a rock with a, so the signs are going to change, but they should be consistent.
Yep.
I agree.
Yep, no, I agree. I think what I'd like to do is start and sit down with her, and I'd be happy to volunteer to do that with anybody else who's interested, and we can sit down and just get a starting base, report it back here, and then sort of take next steps.
Should we, as a committee, prior to that, decide kind of what we want to get out of this at the end of the day? Right, what items we want to make sure are included in the signage to kind of help give them a little more direction? Because, I mean, you can go from any town. You drive by the Danvers property on Route 114. It's a 4x6 massive blue sign that includes everybody, including the governor's name on it, I think. Versus some of the more minimal signage, I think is a little more elegant. That's probably more along the lines of how I think most of us are thinking. If we were able to kind of just nail down, we want to make sure that every sign includes these 4 items. That kind of dictates the size and the scope. Does that then give the town manager a little more direction to go back to her team?
I think that sounds like a good idea, and it sounded to me like you just volunteered to take that on.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome.
So moved.
Now, I'm going to show you how I'm not very technical, but if you had one of those things you could put your phone up to, that would then.
Oh, like a QR code. Yeah, that would be cool, Terry.
So that would just the whole history of
And take you right to the site.
it would, yeah.
Oh, that would be very cool.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Oh, Terry, you're the man. Very good call. All right.
Go home and blow
All right.
up
So
the
we have a
computer.
couple things there. Does everybody seem satisfied with that direction? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is just I learned earlier this week. It's just sort of I wanted to make this sort of announcement. I learned earlier this week that the town manager would like us to close out some of our open projects. I think we are going to put that on the agenda for our next meeting. So I wanted to give you all ample opportunity to, foreknowledge of that, so that over the next month you can think about, the open projects and where you individually stand on them, so you can come prepared to talk about it in May. Go ahead.
I have a question on that. Do we owe the applicants of those projects? Do they have to come back before us?
I think first we need to have. No, I don't think they need to come back.
I wasn't sure
before us.
procedurally if we had to
No.
or not. Okay.
No.
No, but we might want to, before you can get it on the agenda, is look at what we're looking at closing, and say
So-
say there's 3 projects that are up at the Stevens Estate, we might want to just have them come in and say, hey, what's the status on those? So that we have some knowledge of what we're
Yeah.
about to close.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking is, Lori, perhaps the town manager has a list of the projects that she'd like us to close, that she could transmit to us, so that we are all working from the same list going into next meeting?
Clarify, it's not that she asked,
I'm sorry.
she's suggesting that they're old.
That-
And you
that-
might
you're
wanna
right.
look at them
That
to-
mischaracterization
yeah.
was mine.
Yeah.
That she's asking that we look at them to see
Look
if
at them Because they've been so old and stale that.
they haven't, money has not been spent on them in 5 years or
And it
something.
is something that the auditors look at.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you for that. I did mischaracterize that slightly, so.
Oh, all right.
All right, so is everybody good with that?
Yeah, I think that we probably all have a list from our January.
I think we probably have
February,
a list, but it would be great if there are any
We're all on the same
specific
page.
ones that the town manager might want to point out, or do you think we have that information?
Highlighted on the last
Okay.
financials that were forwarded, but I'll double check.
That would be great, thank you. Okay, so our final agenda item is the approval for the minutes of March 14th, 2019. Does anybody have a motion on that?
Motion to accept?
Second.
All right, I hear a motion to accept in a second. How's everyone feel about that? Aye.
All right.
All right. Well, that's it. Do I have another motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hearing no opposition, we are now adjourned.